Deadly Paradise, a Dubai honeymoon tragedy. Breaking right now, an active police scene. Take a look here tonight at the exclusive Anantara Kahava Resort in the Maldives. 911. What's your emergency? Please help me. Something's wrong with my wife. She's not breathing. There's water everywhere. Please hurry. October 7th, 2023. A luxury water bungalow in the Maldives becomes a crime scene that would shock the international community. A 27-year-old Filipina woman lies dead in what should have been a dream honeymoon suite. Her new husband, a Dubai real estate mogul, claims it was a tragic drowning accident. But investigators would soon discover that nothing about this case was what it seemed. This is the story of Hakim Al-Mansouri, a multimillionaire with 2 wives, 5 children, and a fatal weakness for beauty that concealed deception. And this is the story of Rosalinda Santos, a woman whose desperate climb from poverty masked a secret that would ultimately cost her life. What you're about to hear is a story of international romance, calculated deception, and cold-blooded murder that spans 3 continents and reveals the darkest depths of human desperation and rage. Welcome to Crime Truth, where the darkest realities are exposed. To our incredible viewers and loyal subscribers, thank you for standing by us. Your support means everything. Stay with us as we bring you daily updates on the most chilling and shocking true crime stories you can't look away from. And remember, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The body of Rosalinda Santos was discovered at 6:37 a.m. on October 7, 2023, floating face down in the private infinity pool of an overwater villa at the Anantara Kahava Maldives Villas Resort. The luxury accommodation, costing over $3,000 per night, had been booked for a 2-week honeymoon stay. Resort security footage would later show Hakim Al-Mansouri, 55, her husband of only 7 days, pacing frantically on the private deck, making a call to resort emergency services. When first responders arrived, they found Rosalinda's body pulled from the water, lying on the teak deck. She was wearing a silk nightgown, soaked through and clinging to her slender frame. Hakim, dressed in pajama pants and a t-shirt, was attempting CPR, though medical examiners would later determine she had been dead for at least 4 hours. She must have gone for a midnight swim, he told the resort doctor between sobs. I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I found her like this. Initial impressions supported his story. A tragic accident. A new bride, perhaps unfamiliar with swimming, drowning during a romantic late-night dip. A honeymoon paradise transformed into a nightmare for a grieving new husband. But as Maldivian authorities began their standard investigation, troubling inconsistencies emerged. The silk nightgown seemed an unlikely choice for swimming. There were no wet footprints leading from the bedroom to the pool, just a single trail of water droplets leading from the pool to where her body lay. Most troublingly, preliminary examination by the resort doctor noted bruising around Rosalinda's neck that seemed inconsistent with drowning. Within hours, what began as a tragic accident investigation had become something far more sinister. International authorities were contacted. The honeymoon suite became a sealed crime scene, and Hakim Al-Mansouri, who had arrived in the Maldives as a honeymooning husband, found himself confined to the island as the primary suspect in what appeared to be a calculated murder. To understand how Rosalinda Santos died, we must first understand who she was and how she came to marry one of Dubai's most successful real estate developers. Born in 1996 in the poverty-stricken outskirts of Cebu City in the Philippines, Rosalinda's early life was defined by struggle. The third of 5 children, she grew up in a 2-room concrete house with a corrugated metal roof that leaked during the frequent tropical storms. Her father, a construction worker, abandoned the family when she was 8, leaving her mother to support 5 children by working as a laundress for wealthy families in Cebu's exclusive neighborhoods. Neighbors recall Rosalinda as a strikingly beautiful child with an intelligent, observant nature. Former teachers at her public school describe a student with natural aptitude but limited opportunity. She dropped out at 16, not from lack of ability but from the pressing need to contribute to her family's income. She was always watching, always learning, recalls her childhood friend Elena Domingo. Even as a teenager, Rosalinda would study how the wealthy women in Cebu dressed, how they spoke. She would practice their mannerisms, their way of walking. She always said, "I'm going to have that life someday." Her first job was as a salesgirl in a small boutique catering to tourists, where her natural beauty and quick language skills made her a valuable employee. By 19, she had saved enough to enroll in a vocational program for hospitality management, seeing it as a pathway to international employment. At 22, she secured a position as a household staff member for a wealthy family in Dubai, joining the vast exodus of Filipino workers seeking better opportunities abroad. For girls like Rosalinda, Dubai represents a golden ticket, explains Dr. Maria Concepcion Jimenez, a sociologist specializing in Filipino migrant workers. The salary they can earn there in domestic work might be 10 times what they could make at home. But it comes with significant risks, isolation, vulnerability, and a precarious legal status entirely dependent on their employer. Rosalinda arrived in Dubai in January 2019, one of approximately 750,000 Filipinos working in the United Arab Emirates. Her initial position was with the Al-Farsi family, where she served as a household assistant and occasional nanny to their young children. By all accounts, she was hardworking, respectful, and eager to please. But within the Filipino expatriate community in Dubai, Rosalinda quickly observed a different path, one that seemed to offer a more direct route to the wealth and security she craved. Hakim Al-Mansouri represented everything Rosalinda aspired to access. Born in 1968 to an established Emirati family, he had inherited substantial wealth and multiplied it through shrewd real estate investments during Dubai's explosive growth in the early 2000s. His company, Al-Mansouri Developments, had constructed some of the city's most recognizable luxury buildings, including the 60-story Sapphire Tower on Sheikh Zayed Road. By 2023, his personal net worth was estimated at over $300 million. He owned 3 homes in Dubai, vacation properties in London and the south of France, a collection of luxury automobiles, and a 40-meter yacht frequently seen cruising the Persian Gulf. His personal life reflected the traditional polygamous structure permitted to wealthy men in the UAE. His first wife, Amina, whom he had married in 1990, was the mother of his 3 adult children and managed his household affairs. His second wife, Farah, 13 years younger and married in 2010, was known for her social connections and charity work, helping to maintain the family's standing in Dubai's elite circles. According to those who knew him, Hakim was considered a fair businessman, a generous employer, and a man who took his family responsibilities seriously. He was also known to value his privacy and guard his reputation fiercely. In Dubai society, especially among the wealthy Emirati families, reputation is everything, explains cultural consultant Saeed Al-Hashimi. A man's honor is intrinsically tied to how others perceive his family. Any scandal or public embarrassment can have serious repercussions, not just socially but professionally as well. This emphasis on reputation would later prove crucial to understanding the events that unfolded in that Maldives water bungalow. The paths of Rosalinda Santos and Hakim Al-Mansouri first crossed in May 2023 at the Dubai Mall's luxury wing. By this point, Rosalinda had transformed herself through careful observation and strategic relationships. No longer working as household staff, she had secured a position as a cosmetics consultant at a high-end department store, a job that allowed her to interact with wealthy clientele and perfect her cultivated persona. Security footage from the mall, later obtained by investigators, shows their first meeting. Rosalinda, elegantly dressed in a modest but fashionable outfit, helping Hakim select a fragrance, presumably as a gift. Their interaction lasted approximately 17 minutes, ending with Hakim purchasing an expensive perfume and leaving his business card. What the security footage couldn't capture was the calculation behind Rosalinda's charm. By this point, she was already 16 weeks pregnant by her former employer, a married businessman who had dismissed her when she revealed her condition. With limited options and her visa status in jeopardy, she had been actively seeking a solution to her increasingly desperate situation. According to text messages later recovered from her phone, Rosalinda had confided her pregnancy to just 2 friends, both fellow Filipinas who had secured their positions in Dubai through marriages to wealthy men. "I need to find someone fast," she wrote to her friend Jasmine on April 30th, 2023. "Someone who will marry me quickly and not ask too many questions." In Hakim Al-Mansouri, she believed she had found her salvation. Wealthy enough to provide the security she desperately needed, old enough to potentially overlook inconsistencies in her background, and clearly attracted to her carefully constructed persona of sophisticated grace. Their courtship progressed with remarkable speed. Within 2 weeks of their first meeting, they were dining at exclusive restaurants. By mid-June, Hakim had introduced her to select business associates as his special friend. By July, he had proposed marriage, offering to make her his third wife, a position that would grant her legal status, financial security, and the lifestyle she had observed from afar for so many years. The wedding took place on September 30th, 2023, a private ceremony attended by just a handful of witnesses. Notably absent were Hakim's first 2 wives, his children, and any members of his extended family, an unusual circumstance that would later raise questions among investigators. Photographs from the ceremony show Rosalinda radiant, in a designer wedding gown carefully selected to conceal her now 6-month pregnancy. Hakim appears proud and possessive, his arm constantly around his beautiful young bride's waist. 7 days later, they arrived at the Maldives resort for their honeymoon. 7 days after that, Rosalinda Santos was dead. The timeline that emerges from resort staff testimonies, security footage, and digital evidence paints a disturbing picture of how paradise became a deadly trap. October 1st. The newlyweds arrive by seaplane to the exclusive resort, checking into their premium overwater villa. Staff recall them appearing happy, Hakim generous with tips, Rosalinda quiet but smiling. They dine privately in their villa that evening. October 2nd to 3rd. They participate in standard honeymoon activities, couples massage, sunset cruise, snorkeling excursion. Resort photographers capture images of them smiling, Hakim attentive and affectionate. But a spa attendant later recalls noticing bruising on Rosalinda's arm, which she attributed to honeymoon passion. October 4th. The first visible tension. Security footage from the resort's main restaurant shows Hakim speaking intensely to Rosalinda, who appears to be crying. Their waitress overhears him questioning her about her background, specifically about discrepancies in stories she had told about her family in the Philippines. October 5th. Hakim receives multiple international calls on his satellite phone. Resort records show he books a private excursion alone, unusual for a honeymoon. Rosalinda remains in the villa, ordering room service and declining housekeeping. October 6th. The couple's butler reports Hakim requesting a resort doctor for Rosalinda, claiming she is experiencing female problems. The doctor, Dr. Aisha Nasim, later testifies to noticing Rosalinda's obvious pregnancy and Hakim's apparent shock when this is mentioned. The medical examination becomes a breaking point. That evening, multiple villa guests in adjacent accommodations report hearing shouting from the Al-Mansouri bungalow. Security is called but told by Hakim that everything is fine, just an emotional conversation. The resort staff, trained not to interfere with wealthy guests' privacy, do not pursue the matter further. At approximately 2:15 a.m. on October 7th, infrared security cameras capture movement on the villa's deck. The footage is grainy, but analysts would later enhance it to reveal 2 figures, one clearly Hakim, the other likely Rosalinda, in what appears to be a physical altercation. At 6:32 a.m., Hakim calls resort emergency services, reporting that his wife has drowned. The initial investigation by Maldivian authorities was hampered by jurisdictional complications and the influence of Hakim's wealth. But forensic evidence told a story that could not be ignored or dismissed. The autopsy, conducted by an international team at the insistence of the Filipino embassy, revealed that Rosalinda Santos had not drowned. She had been strangled to death, her neck bearing the distinctive bruising pattern of manual strangulation. Water had entered her lungs post-mortem, not as the cause of death. Most damningly, the autopsy confirmed her pregnancy, approximately 30 weeks, and DNA testing would later prove that Hakim Al-Mansouri was not the father. The paradise honeymoon had become the perfect murder scene, isolated, controlled, and far from either of their home countries. But Hakim had not accounted for the international scrutiny that would follow the death of a young woman in such circumstances, nor the digital footprint that would reveal his calculated rage. If you're finding this story as disturbing as we are, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We dive deep into cases like this that reveal the complex psychology behind international crimes, where cultural differences and desperation collide with deadly consequences. Rosalinda Santos' path from impoverished child to sophisticated bride was not a matter of lucky breaks or natural evolution. It was a carefully executed strategy born of desperation and fueled by the example of other Filipino women who had found their own shortcuts to security. In Cebu City's Punta Princesa district, where Rosalinda spent her childhood, the evidence of success among overseas Filipino workers was everywhere. Houses under construction with remittance money, children attending private schools, families that once struggled now displaying the tangible benefits of having a relative abroad. But even more visible were the Dubai success stories. Women who had returned from the UAE not just with savings, but wearing gold jewelry, designer clothes, and the unmistakable confidence that comes with financial security. In our neighborhood, we all knew which families had daughters in Dubai, recalls Maricel Bautista, Rosalinda's former neighbor. When those daughters came home for visits, they were like celebrities. New clothes, expensive gifts for everyone, stories about the skyscrapers and shopping malls. For girls like Rosalinda, those women were living proof that Dubai could transform your life. Rosalinda's journey to Dubai began with standard recruitment channels. She attended job fairs in Cebu, submitted applications to overseas employment agencies, and eventually secured a position through Horizon International Staffing, a legitimate agency that specialized in placing Filipino workers with employers in the Gulf states. The contract promised 1,500 dirhams monthly, approximately $400, accommodations within the employer's home, 1 day off per week, and a 2-year placement with the possibility of renewal. For a young woman earning less than $100 monthly in the Philippines, it seemed an opportunity too good to pass up. They showed us videos of Dubai's magnificent buildings, the clean streets, the safety for women. Rosalinda wrote in a journal later recovered from her apartment. They told us that the families were respectful, that we would be treated well. They said 2 years would pass quickly, and we'd return home with savings that could change our families' lives forever. Reality proved more complicated. Rosalinda's arrival in Dubai in January 2019 coincided with the city's high season, perfect weather, tourists everywhere, the cityscape exactly as glamorous as promised. But her position with the Al-Farsi family immediately established the hierarchical dynamic that would shape her early experience. As household staff, she worked 14-hour days, 6 days per week. Her responsibilities included cleaning, laundry, food preparation, childcare, and whatever additional tasks the family required. Her living quarters were adequate but basic, a small room off the kitchen with a single bed, minimal storage, and a shared bathroom with another household employee. The first shock for many Filipino domestic workers is the loss of autonomy, explains Leila Rodriguez, a caseworker with the Filipino Workers Resource Center in Dubai. Back home, no matter how poor, they had freedom of movement, their own schedule. In Dubai, they live by their employer's timetable, often with restricted communication with family, limited ability to leave the residence, and complete dependence on the employer for their legal status in the country. Rosalinda's early letters home, provided by her mother to investigators, reflect this difficult adjustment. She writes of exhaustion, homesickness, and the constant reminder of her position at the bottom of Dubai's rigid social hierarchy. But even in these early communications, there's evidence of her observant nature and strategic thinking. The houses we clean are bigger than our entire neighborhood combined, she wrote 3 months after arrival. Yesterday I helped prepare for a party where they spent more on flowers than my entire year's salary. But I'm watching and learning. This is not where my story ends. The turning point in Rosalinda's Dubai experience came not through her employers, but through her connections with other Filipino workers. On her weekly day off, she would meet with compatriots at Satwa Park or the Filipino supermarket, sharing experiences and building a support network that proved crucial to her survival. and ultimately to her transformation. It was through these connections that Rosalinda first encountered women who had found a different path to prosperity. Among the domestic workers and service staff were those who had secured their position in Dubai not through labor but through relationships with wealthy men. Some had become girlfriends, others legal wives under the UAE's polygamous marriage laws. Carmela showed up to our Friday gathering wearing Chanel. Rosalinda wrote in her journal in August 2019. Real Chanel, not the knockoffs from Karama Market. She was working at Al Manzil Hotel's restaurant when she met her Emirati businessman. Now she lives in a villa in Jumeirah and sends her family enough money to build a 2-story concrete house in Manila. She says the secret is to make them see you not as staff, but as someone who belongs in their world. Over the next year, Rosalinda's journal entries document her systematic observation of these women and their methods. She noted how they spoke, the vocabulary they used, the topics they discussed, the confident but respectful tone they adopted with powerful men. She studied their body language, the way they carried themselves, their posture, the subtle signals of class that separated the wealthy from those merely pretending. Most importantly, she mapped their trajectories, where they positioned themselves to meet prospective partners, how they cultivated relationships, and how they navigated the complex cultural terrain of becoming a foreign wife in Emirati society. By early 2020, Rosalinda had begun her deliberate self-transformation. She invested nearly 3 months' salary in a comprehensive wardrobe upgrade, not flashy or revealing clothes, but elegant, modest pieces that mimicked what she had seen worn by educated, professional women in Dubai. She enrolled in evening English classes to perfect her accent and expand her vocabulary. She borrowed books on art, current events, and global business from the community library, studying topics that would allow her to converse confidently in sophisticated circles. "I'm not learning these things to impress people," she wrote. "I'm learning them because knowledge is the difference between being treated as a servant and being treated as an equal." Her opportunity for advancement came in June 2021, when a Lebanese family friend of the Al-Farsis mentioned needing staff for their boutique in City Walk, an upscale shopping district. Recognizing her chance, Rosalinda had prepared herself through months of studying fashion magazines and observing how luxury items were sold. Her transformed appearance and carefully cultivated mannerisms helped secure her the position. At Maison Elegance, she worked as a sales associate helping wealthy customers select high-end accessories. The job paid better than domestic work, but more importantly, it positioned her in proximity to Dubai's elite, allowing her to further refine her understanding of their world while making potentially valuable connections. Working at the boutique was like advanced training, her friend Jasmine later told investigators. Rosalinda learned exactly how wealthy people expect to be treated. She could discuss the difference between Italian and French leather, recommend pieces that complemented a customer's existing collection, speak the language of luxury that made rich clients feel understood. But she was always watching, always planning her next move. By January 2023, Rosalinda had positioned herself for what she hoped would be her final career change. Through connections made at the boutique, she secured a position at the cosmetics counter of Galeries Lafayette in Dubai Mall, the epicenter of luxury retail and a guaranteed location for encounters with the city's wealthiest residents. It was here that a critical complication emerged in her carefully planned trajectory. A brief relationship with her married former employer had resulted in pregnancy, discovered in early January 2023 when she was already 6 weeks along. When she informed him, his response was swift and decisive, immediate termination of both relationship and employment, with the clear expectation that she would handle the problem or leave the country. For Rosalinda, this crisis created an impossible situation. Abortion was illegal in the UAE, returning to the Philippines meant surrendering everything she had worked toward, and remaining unmarried and pregnant in Dubai could result in imprisonment under the country's strict morality laws. Text messages retrieved from her phone reveal her escalating desperation. March 3, 2023. "I can't go back to the Philippines like this. My mother would die of shame and we'd lose everything." March 17, 2023. Jasmine says her friend Lorna married a businessman from Saudi last year. He was 60. She was 26. He set her up in an apartment in Dubai and gives her 10,000 dirhams monthly. That's my only option now. April 30th, 2023. I need to find someone fast. Someone who will marry me quickly and not ask too many questions. By May, when she encountered Hakim Al-Mansouri at her cosmetics counter, Rosalinda was approximately 18 weeks pregnant and running out of time. Her work visa would expire in July, the pregnancy would soon become visible, and her options were rapidly diminishing. In Hakim, she identified the ideal target. Wealthy enough to provide the security she needed, already accustomed to a polygamous family structure, and most importantly, visibly captivated by her carefully constructed persona. Their first interaction at the cosmetics counter was no accident. She had observed him shopping for several weeks and positioned herself to assist him during his regular Friday afternoon visit. The courtship that followed was a masterclass in calculated seduction. Not sexual, but intellectual and emotional. Rosalinda presented herself as the perfect companion, sophisticated enough to appreciate his world, yet impressed enough by it to flatter his ego. She displayed just enough knowledge of art, business, and current events to seem educated, but always deferred to his greater wisdom and experience. She never asked him for gifts or money during the courtship, notes Detective Fatima Al-Zabi of the Dubai police. According to his financial records, he voluntarily showered her with presents, designer handbags, jewelry, even a down payment on a small apartment in Sport City. This approach differentiated her from women he might have dismissed as gold diggers, making her seem genuinely interested in him rather than his wealth. By July, barely 2 months after their first meeting, Hakim proposed marriage. Rosalinda, now approaching 24 weeks pregnant and skillfully concealing her condition with flowing garments and strategic accessories, accepted immediately. The wedding was arranged for September 30th, a date that would allow just enough time to legally formalize their union before the pregnancy became impossible to hide. What Hakim Al-Mansouri didn't know was that he was marrying a woman carrying another man's child, a deception that would transform their Maldives honeymoon from paradise into a crime scene. Hakim Al-Mansouri was born into privilege at a time when Dubai was still finding its footing on the world stage. Unlike the gleaming metropolis of today, the Dubai of his childhood in the late 1960s was a modest trading port beginning its transformation under the visionary leadership of Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum. Hakim's father, Ibrahim Al-Mansouri, had built a successful pearl trading business that he pivoted to real estate as Dubai began its early development. The family home in Al-Bastakia, now a historic district, was substantial by the standards of the time, a traditional wind tower house with an interior courtyard where Hakim and his 4 siblings grew up surrounded by both luxury and tradition. His mother, Latifa, maintained a household that balanced cosmopolitan influences with deep respect for Emirati culture and values. The Al-Mansouri family represented the ideal of modern Dubai even before Dubai became what we know today, explains cultural historian Abdullah Al-Suwaidi. They embraced progress and business opportunities while remaining deeply connected to traditional values. For families like theirs, success was measured not just in wealth but in honor, reputation, and family stability. Hakim's education reflected this dual perspective. After attending elite private schools in Dubai, he was sent to London for university, graduating from the London School of Economics in 1990 with a degree in international business. This Western education gave him global perspective and business acumen, but he returned to Dubai firmly committed to the traditional values of his upbringing. His business career began under his father's guidance, learning the real estate development business from the ground up despite his family's wealth. Former colleagues describe a man who insisted on understanding every aspect of his projects, from architectural design to construction details to financial structures. Hakim would show up at construction sites at 5 a.m., recalls Muhammad Al-Zaruni, who worked with him during the early 1990s. He would inspect materials, question the engineers, challenge the contractors. He wanted to prove he wasn't just another rich man's son playing at business. This hands-on approach served him well as Dubai entered its explosive growth phase in the early 2000s. When other developers were still thinking in terms of individual buildings, Hakim was conceptualizing entire neighborhoods. Al-Mansouri developments became known for mixed-use projects that combined residential, retail, and office space in thoughtfully designed communities. By 2023, his company had completed over 30 major developments, employed more than 5,000 people, and maintained a reputation for quality and reliability even during market downturns. The Al-Mansouri name on a building was considered a guarantee of excellence in Dubai's competitive real estate market. But for all his business success, Hakim's personal identity was equally defined by his family structure and social standing. His first marriage to Amina bint Khalid al-Hashimi in 1990 had been a traditional arrangement between two prominent families, combining wealth, social connections, and compatible values. Amina, educated at the American University of Sharjah and from an equally established Dubai family, brought both dowry and connections that benefited the Al-Mansouri family business. Over 33 years of marriage, she had given Hakim 3 children: Saeed, now 32, Maryam, 28, and Omar, 25, all of whom had been raised with the same balance of traditional values and global education that shaped Hakim's worldview. As the first wife, Amina managed the family's primary residence in Jumeirah, a sprawling villa with separate wings for each adult child and their families. She organized the social obligations that came with their status, the Ramadan gatherings, the Eid celebrations, the family weddings and funerals that cemented their place in Dubai society. In traditional Emirati families, especially wealthy ones, the first wife holds significant power, explains sociologist Dr. Fatima Al-Sayegh. She's not just a spouse but the manager of the family's social capital. Her approval or disapproval can influence business relationships, marriages, and the family's overall standing in the community. Hakim's second marriage in 2010 to Farah bint Hamad al-Qasimi followed a different pattern. At 42, she was 13 years younger than him and represented a more modern element in his life. Educated in the United States with a master's degree in art history from New York University, Farah had worked as a gallery curator before marriage and maintained active involvement in Dubai's cultural scene. This second marriage, while still arranged with family approval, included more input from both Hakim and Farah. She maintained her own residence in a luxury apartment on Palm Jumeirah, though she regularly participated in family gatherings and maintained a respectful relationship with Amina. Their marriage produced no children, but Farah's social connections and cultural activities enhanced the Al-Mansouri family's prominence in Dubai's increasingly international society. Second wives in traditional polygamous arrangements often serve specific social or strategic purposes, notes Dr. Al-Sayegh. In Hakim's case, Farah connected him to Dubai's cultural elite and international business circles that his more traditional first wife might not access as easily. It's a complementary arrangement that reflects both tradition and adaptation to modern Dubai. This carefully balanced family structure, traditional yet adaptable, hierarchical yet functional, was central to Hakim's identity and success. Every business decision, every public appearance, every social connection was filtered through the lens of family reputation and honor. In Dubai's elite circles, the Al-Mansouri name carried weight not just for its wealth but for its perceived adherence to traditional values despite modern success. Which is precisely why his sudden marriage to Rosalinda Santos sent shockwaves through his family and social network. The first indications of trouble came in early September 2023, when Hakim informed his first wife Amina of his intention to take a third wife. Unlike his second marriage, which had been preceded by months of family discussions and careful consideration of social implications, this announcement came with minimal explanation and an accelerated timeline. "I've met someone special," he told Amina during a private dinner at their Jumeirah home. "The wedding is set for September 30th. It will be a small, private ceremony." According to Amina's later testimony to investigators, her immediate concern was not jealousy but reputation. "Who is she? Which family? Have you consulted with the elders?" These questions, standard considerations for marriages in their social circle, were met with uncharacteristically vague responses from Hakim. "She's Filipino, educated, sophisticated. She works in luxury retail. We met at Dubai Mall. She understands our ways." What Amina later described as most disturbing was not the marriage itself. Polygamy was accepted in their culture, but the hasty timeline and lack of traditional protocols. No family meetings with the bride's representatives. No background investigations by trusted advisors. No careful integration of a new wife into existing family structures. When she expressed these concerns, Hakim's response was uncharacteristically dismissive. "The world is changing, Amina. This is my decision to make." Farah's reaction, when informed the following day, was more direct. "Are you having a midlife crisis?" she reportedly asked. "You don't even know this woman." Both wives' concerns were amplified when they learned neither would be attending the wedding ceremony, an unprecedented break with family tradition that raised immediate red flags. When Hakim's eldest son Saeed attempted to intervene, expressing concern about his father's uncharacteristic behavior, he was firmly rebuffed. "My personal decisions are not subject to committee approval," Hakim told him, according to Saeed's statement to police. "This matter is closed." The wedding itself took place at the Four Seasons Resort Dubai, a private ceremony with just 6 guests, all business associates of Hakim's with no family members present. Photographs later recovered from Hakim's phone show Rosalinda in a modest but elegantly designed white gown by Lebanese designer Elie Saab, Hakim in a traditional dishdasha, both smiling for professionally staged photographs. What the photographs couldn't capture was the growing uncertainty that had begun to take root in Hakim's mind. According to his driver, Nadim Khan, Hakim had begun asking unusual questions in the days leading up to the wedding. "He asked me to drive past an address in Al-Quaz," Khan told investigators. "A very modest apartment building. When I asked if he needed to stop, he said no, he was just confirming something." The address, investigators later confirmed, was Rosalinda's actual residence, not the upscale Sports City apartment she had claimed to live in when discussing her background with Hakim. This discrepancy was the first of several that had triggered Hakim's suspicions. Despite his apparent infatuation with Rosalinda, his business instincts had eventually asserted themselves. 1 week before the wedding, he contacted Falcon Security Services, a private investigation firm frequently used by Dubai's elite to vet potential business partners. The initial request was standard background verification, confirmed Rashid Al-Falasi, the firm's director. Mr. Al-Mansouri wanted confirmation of her employment history, education credentials, and family background in the Philippines. He specified the information was time-sensitive. The wedding proceeded before these investigations were complete, a decision Hakim would later regret profoundly. The legal documentation of the marriage gave Rosalinda significant protections under UAE law, establishing her as his legal wife with all associated rights and privileges. The honeymoon planning revealed another dimension of Hakim's complex psychology regarding his new bride. While most Emirati men of his position would have introduced a new wife to family members before any extended travel, Hakim specifically chose a destination that would isolate them from both his family connections and her support network. "The Maldives provides complete privacy," he wrote in an email to his travel coordinator on September 25. "I want a water villa with its own pool, no shared walls with other accommodations, and maximum security." The email specified the Anantara Kahava Resort's most exclusive overwater residence, a 5,000-square-foot villa accessible only by private boat. What investigators would later determine was that Hakim had timed this isolation perfectly with the expected delivery of the private investigator's report. Falcon Security had been instructed to send their findings directly to his personal email no later than October 5, midway through the planned honeymoon, when they would be thousands of miles from either Dubai or the Philippines. The report, recovered from Hakim's phone after his arrest, was devastating in its clarity. It revealed Rosalinda's actual background as a former domestic worker, her previous employment termination, her lack of the educational credentials she had claimed, and, most damaging, medical records indicating a pregnancy that predated their relationship by several months. The timestamp on Hakim's first viewing of this document, October 5, 2023, 3:42 p.m. Maldives time, precisely when resort security cameras captured him returning alone from his private excursion, his expression unreadable as he entered their villa where Rosalinda waited, unaware that her carefully constructed facade had just collapsed. What happened in the 36 hours between his receipt of this information and Rosalinda's death would become the central focus of the murder investigation. The Anantara Kahava Maldives Villas exists in a category beyond mere luxury. Accessible only by seaplane or speedboat, it occupies its own private island in the Bar Atoll, a UNESCO biosphere reserve where crystal waters meet white sand beaches and lush tropical vegetation. The resort's exclusive overwater residences extend from a wooden jetty, each villa standing on stilts above the turquoise lagoon, separated from neighbors by expanses of open water that ensure absolute privacy. For wealthy guests like Hakim and Rosalinda Al-Mansouri, arrival itself is choreographed as theater. October 1, 2023. Their seaplane touched down on the glassy surface of the Indian Ocean at precisely 2:15 p.m. Resort footage shows staff in crisp white uniforms waiting on the jetty with refreshment towels and welcome drinks. Hakim appears relaxed, his hand resting possessively at the small of Rosalinda's back. She looks momentarily overwhelmed by the splendor, a subtle break in her carefully maintained composure that would later seem significant. The Al-Mansouris were assigned our most requested accommodation, the Grand Residence, recalls Sanjay Mehta, the resort manager. It's completely detached from other villas, with its own infinity pool, private deck, and direct ocean access. The design ensures that guests can spend their entire stay without being seen by anyone if they choose. This isolation, marketed as exclusive privacy, would later be scrutinized by investigators as the perfect controlled environment for psychological manipulation and, ultimately, murder. Their first day followed the resort's standard honeymoon protocol. A dedicated butler, Raj Bandara, showed them through the 5,000-square-foot residence with its glass floor panels revealing marine life below, outdoor bathroom with sunken tub, and private infinity pool extending toward the horizon. A champagne toast on arrival, a couple's massage scheduled for sunset, dinner arranged on their private deck under the stars. Resort photographs taken during this initial tour show Rosalinda attempting to maintain her sophisticated facade, while clearly overwhelmed by luxury beyond anything in her experience. In one telling image, she stands frozen beside the outdoor shower, uncertain how to respond when Raj demonstrates the controls. Hakim watches her reaction with an expression that, in retrospect, contains the first hints of suspicion. Mr. Al-Mansouri requested our honeymoon photo package, Raj later told investigators. Professional photographs of their activities throughout the stay. Standard for our celebrity and high-net-worth guests who want to document their experience. What initially appeared as a romantic gesture would become another element in Hakim's psychological strategy, creating a documented record of their honeymoon while simultaneously gathering evidence of inconsistencies in Rosalinda's behavior. Days 2 and 3 maintained the appearance of newlywed bliss. They participated in a dolphin-watching excursion, enjoyed a private beachside dinner, and spent hours snorkeling above the resort's house reef. But resort staff began noticing subtle tensions. During their sunset cruise on the second evening, Rosalinda mistakenly referred to champagne as expensive wine, a slip that drew a sharp glance from Hakim. "I observed Mr. Al-Mansouri testing his wife in small ways," said Ibrahim Nasir, their sunset cruise attendant. He would ask her opinion about the vintage of the champagne or whether she preferred Maldivian or Caribbean coral reefs, questions that seemed designed to expose gaps in her knowledge. These tests intensified during their third day. During breakfast, Hakim casually mentioned mutual friends in Dubai, people who didn't exist, and watched as Rosalinda pretended familiarity. During their couple's spa treatment, he asked detailed questions about her supposed education in Switzerland, noting discrepancies in her timeline. The psychological pressure became more evident on day 4. Security footage from the resort's underwater restaurant, Sub 6, captures the first public confrontation. Seated at the most exclusive table surrounded by glass walls revealing the vibrant reef, Hakim orders without consulting the menu, a power move demonstrating familiarity with fine dining. When Rosalinda attempts to do the same but hesitates over pronunciations, his expression hardens. "Is something wrong with the menu, Habibti?" he asks, using the Arabic term of endearment that had become increasingly cold in his usage. "No, everything looks wonderful," she responds, visibly flustered. "Perhaps you're unaccustomed to French cuisine? I thought you mentioned studying in Geneva?" The exchange continues with mounting tension as Hakim systematically exposes small contradictions in her previous stories. The meal concludes with Rosalinda in tears and Hakim watching her with calculating detachment. Their return to the villa that evening marks the beginning of more overt conflict. Adjacent villa guests report raised voices around 11 p.m. Resort security logs show a wellness check requested by neighboring guests, with staff reporting a heated discussion but no apparent danger. Day 5 brings the pivotal escalation. Hakim receives multiple international calls on his satellite phone, later confirmed to be conversations with the Falcon Security Agency in Dubai. Phone records show a 27-minute call at 2:13 p.m., followed immediately by Hakim booking a private fishing excursion without Rosalinda, his first solo activity of the honeymoon. Resort footage shows his departure at 2:45 p.m., expression unreadable. While alone on the boat, he receives and reads the comprehensive report on Rosalinda's actual background, her work as a domestic servant, her fabricated education credentials, her previous relationship with her employer, and crucially, medical records indicating a pregnancy that began months before their relationship. His return to the villa at 5:37 p.m. is captured on security cameras. His body language has transformed completely, rigid posture, fists clenched, jaw tight with controlled rage. Inside the villa, beyond the view of cameras, the confrontation begins. We could hear shouting from over the water, reports Amanda Chan, a guest in the nearest villa, approximately 100 meters away. A man's voice very angry, then a woman crying, pleading. It went on for almost an hour. Resort logs show Rosalinda attempting to call the front desk at 7:12 p.m., a call that disconnects after 3 seconds. When butler Raj Bandara arrives with their scheduled dinner service at 8 p.m., he finds the couple composed but tense. Rosalinda with visible redness around her eyes, Hakim coldly courteous as he explains they would prefer to dine separately that evening. Mrs. Al-Mansouri's hands were shaking when she took the water glass, Raj recalled. Mr. Al-Mansouri watched her constantly, barely blinking. The atmosphere was frightening. The most damning evidence of Hakim's methodical psychological dismantling comes on day 6. Having confirmed Rosalinda's pregnancy through the investigator's report, he orchestrates a public exposure of her deception. Security footage from the villa shows him searching her toiletry bag while she showers, discovering prenatal vitamins prescribed by a Dubai clinic 3 months before their wedding. At breakfast, he casually mentions feeling unwell, suggesting they visit the resort doctor. Perhaps we both should be checked, he says, his tone deceptively concerned. To be safe, the resort's medical center becomes the scene of Rosalinda's final humiliation. Dr. Aisha Nassim recalls the appointment clearly. Mr. Al-Mansouri insisted his wife be examined first, mentioning concerns about her fatigue and morning nausea. During the standard examination, I naturally noted her pregnancy, approximately 6 months advanced. When I mentioned this, assuming they knew Mr. Al-Mansouri's expression, I've never seen such controlled fury. The medical report, later entered as evidence, notes, patient approximately 25 weeks pregnant. When this was mentioned, male spouse appeared shocked, then quickly controlled his reaction. Female patient became extremely distressed. Consultation ended abruptly with male spouse insisting they return to their villa to discuss privately. The timeline of the final 24 hours is reconstructed from a combination of security footage, staff observations, and forensic evidence. The couple returns to their villa at 2:17 p.m. Resort cameras capture no further activity until 6:43 p.m. when Rosalinda appears briefly on the deck, making a call on her cell phone. Phone records show a 3-minute call to the Philippines, her last communication with her family. At 7:30 p.m., Hakim orders a room service dinner and a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne, maintaining appearances while the psychological torture continues behind closed doors. The server who delivers their meal reports that Rosalinda appears to have been crying, but is making efforts to seem composed. At 9:45 p.m., the nearest neighbors report hearing shouting again, this time with the sound of breaking glass. Security is dispatched but once again finds Hakim calmly insistent that everything is fine. Just a minor disagreement about our return travel plans. Between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., the villa is quiet. What happens during these hours must be pieced together from forensic evidence rather than witness testimony. The resort's perimeter cameras, designed to monitor the surrounding water for safety rather than the villas themselves. Capture movement on the Al-Mansouri deck at approximately 2:15 a.m. Enhanced footage shows two figures, one clearly Hakim in light-colored clothing, the other smaller figure consistent with Rosalinda's height and build, engaged in what appears to be a physical struggle. At 2:19 a.m., only one figure remains visible on the deck. The forensic reconstruction, based on blood spatter patterns, furniture displacement, and Rosalinda's injuries, suggests the confrontation began in the living area of the villa. A broken vase, overturned chair, and blood droplets on the teakwood floor indicate she attempted to flee toward the bedroom. The physical evidence shows she was intercepted near the sliding door to the deck, where the fatal attack occurred. The autopsy report is unequivocal. Cause of death: asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. Victim sustained crushing damage to the hyoid bone and trachea consistent with application of substantial force by hands of significant size and strength. Petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes and facial tissue indicates strangulation lasting 2 to 3 minutes minimum. Death occurred between approximately 2 to 3 a.m. Additional findings note defensive wounds on her forearms and hands, bruising to her shoulders where she was held down, and a contusion on the back of her head consistent with impact against a hard surface, likely the deck railing. Most crucially, the autopsy confirms she was approximately 25 weeks pregnant with a male fetus, with DNA testing later establishing that Hakim was not the biological father. The 4-hour gap between the murder and Hakim's emergency call at 6:32 a.m. represents his calculated attempt to create an accidental drowning scenario. Forensic evidence indicates he placed Rosalinda's body in the infinity pool sometime after 3 a.m., arranged her nightgown to appear as though she had gone for a spontaneous swim, and then waited until morning light to discover her and call for help. Water in her lungs confirmed she had been placed in the pool after death, not as the cause of death. The chlorine had partially obscured some evidence, but not the distinctive bruising pattern on her neck that clearly indicated manual strangulation. When emergency responders arrived, they found Hakim performing what appeared to be desperate CPR efforts, a performance that momentarily convinced resort staff of his genuine distress. But the medical evidence told a different story. Rosalinda Santos had not drowned in a tragic accident during her dream honeymoon. She had been methodically exposed, psychologically tortured, and ultimately murdered by the man who had promised to give her everything she had ever wanted. As resort security secured the crime scene and Maldivian police began their investigation, Hakim maintained his composed facade of the grieving husband, a performance that would quickly unravel as the evidence mounted against him. The death of Rosalinda Santos triggered an investigation complicated by multiple layers of jurisdiction, wealth-based influence, and international politics. When resort security locked down the Al-Mansouri villa at 7:15 a.m. on October 7th, they initiated protocols designed for high-profile incidents involving foreign nationals, a situation the exclusive Maldives resorts had unfortunately encountered before. "Our first priority is securing the scene and the guests involved," explains Ibrahim Wahid, head of security for Anantara Kahava. "We immediately activated our crisis management team, which includes coordination with Maldivian police, medical examiners, and diplomatic liaisons." Hakim Al-Mansouri's initial statement to resort security established the narrative he would maintain throughout early questioning. "I woke up around 6:30 and found my wife wasn't in bed. I checked the bathroom, then the living area, and finally saw her floating in the pool. I pulled her out immediately and tried CPR, but she wasn't responding. She must have gone for an early morning swim and gotten into difficulty." This account, plausible on its surface, was quickly undermined by preliminary medical examination. Dr. Nassim, the resort physician who responded to the emergency call, noted in her initial report, "Victim shows signs inconsistent with simple drowning, pronounced bruising around neck area, defensive wounds on forearms, body temperature indicating death occurred several hours before reported discovery." When Maldivian police arrived by speedboat at 9:22 a.m., they faced immediate jurisdictional challenges. A UAE national was potentially involved in the death of a Philippine national on Maldivian territory, a three-nation complication that would shape every aspect of the investigation. International cases like this trigger immediate diplomatic notifications, explains Inspector Ahmed Shiryam of the Maldivian Police Service. We contacted both the UAE and Philippine embassies within the first hour, knowing this would require coordinated investigation. The Maldivian authorities moved quickly to secure physical evidence before diplomatic interference could potentially compromise the investigation. The crime scene was photographed extensively, blood samples collected from multiple locations in the villa, and Rosalinda's body transported to Malé, the Maldivian capital, for autopsy. Hakim Al-Mansouri was not formally detained but was confined to a separate resort villa under surveillance, a compromise that respected his status while ensuring he couldn't leave the island. His passport was secured, communication limited to monitored calls to his attorney, and a police guard stationed outside his accommodation. We were aware of Mr. Al-Mansouri's wealth and connections, Inspector Shiryam acknowledged. There was immediate pressure from Dubai to handle the matter discreetly, with suggestions that the death was likely accidental. Our priority was protecting the integrity of the investigation. Digital evidence collection began simultaneously with the physical investigation. Rosalinda's phone was recovered from her bedside table, while Hakim's devices were seized during his transfer to the monitored villa. Resort security footage was immediately secured, and access logs for the villa, recording every staff entry and electronic key usage, were downloaded for analysis. The autopsy, conducted the following day by Dr. Farah Ismail with international observers present at the insistence of the Philippine embassy, delivered the definitive evidence that transformed the investigation from potential accident to homicide. Cause of death is manual strangulation, Dr. Ismail stated in her report. The hyoid bone is fractured in a manner consistent with application of significant force by human hands. Bruising patterns on the neck match finger impressions from hands of substantial size. Death occurred between approximately 2 to 3 a.m., significantly earlier than the reported discovery time. The autopsy revealed two additional critical findings. First, Rosalinda's lungs contained minimal water, inconsistent with drowning as the primary cause of death. Water present appeared to have entered post-mortem. Second, she was approximately 25 weeks pregnant, a fact that immediately altered the investigative dynamics. The pregnancy finding changed everything, noted Inspector Shiryam. It established a potential motive and elevated the stakes significantly. This was potentially a double homicide. As physical evidence mounted, digital forensics provided the narrative framework that would ultimately shatter Hakim's carefully constructed account. Analysis of his satellite phone revealed multiple calls to Dubai in the days before Rosalinda's death, including lengthy conversations with Falcon Security Services on October 5th. Most damning was the recovery of deleted files from Hakim's phone. Specifically, the private investigator's report received on October 5th that detailed Rosalinda's actual background and previous pregnancy. The report included medical records, employment history, and witness statements from her former colleagues, all confirming she had deliberately concealed her past and her pregnancy from Hakim. The digital timeline is remarkably clear, explains Farah Ahmed, the lead digital forensics analyst assigned to the case. We can track Mr. Al-Mansouri's psychological state through his communications. After receiving the investigator's report, his messages to his attorney in Dubai shift dramatically in tone. He inquires about annulment proceedings, UAE laws regarding marriage fraud, and potential criminal charges for immigration violations. Witness statements from resort staff filled in the behavioral evidence supporting the digital trail. Butler Raj Bandara provided crucial testimony about the escalating tensions he observed between the couple following Hakim's private excursion on October 5th, precisely when he received the investigator's report. Mr. Al-Mansouri's demeanor changed completely, Raj testified. Before that day, he was attentive, even loving toward his wife. After returning from his boat trip, he watched her constantly, like a predator. When I served dinner that evening, the atmosphere was so tense I feared for her safety. Additional staff corroborated this account. Spa therapist Aminath Shafiq recalled Rosalinda appearing increasingly anxious during her treatment on October 6th, mentioning that her husband was asking strange questions about my past and seemed angry about something he won't explain. The resort doctor's account of the medical examination that revealed Rosalinda's pregnancy to Hakim provided the final link in the chain of escalation leading to murder. Dr. Nassim's detailed notes described Hakim's reaction. Subject exhibited classic signs of controlled rage, pupil dilation, jaw clenching, flushed complexion, before quickly composing himself and insisting they return to their villa. A search of Hakim's luggage yielded the physical copy of the investigator's report, annotated in his handwriting with notes including completely falsified background, pregnant before meeting, and most incriminating, catastrophic risk to family reputation if this becomes public. Financial records subpoenaed from Dubai revealed Hakim had made arrangements suggesting premeditation. 3 days before Rosalinda's death, he had transferred significant funds to his attorney's escrow account with instructions regarding potential settlement requirements and media management services. He had also contacted his travel coordinator about expedited return arrangements, single passenger, for October 8th, the day after Rosalinda was found dead. DNA testing provided the final evidential piece. Samples from the deceased fetus confirmed what the investigation had already established: Hakim Al-Mansouri was not the biological father. This scientific confirmation of Rosalinda's deception cemented the prosecution's theory of motive. 10 days after Rosalinda's death, Maldivian authorities formally charged Hakim Al-Mansouri with premeditated murder. The arrest triggered immediate diplomatic complications, with the UAE government requesting his transfer to Dubai jurisdiction, citing treaty agreements regarding prosecution of their nationals. The extradition battle was intense, recalls Maldivian prosecutor Fathimath Nahila. The UAE exerted significant pressure through diplomatic and economic channels. Simultaneously, the Philippine government demanded justice for their citizen, threatening international sanctions if the case wasn't properly prosecuted. The battle for jurisdiction played out across international media, with the Philippine press portraying Rosalinda as a victim of both circumstance and wealthy privilege, while UAE outlets emphasized the alleged deception regarding her pregnancy. The case took another dramatic turn on October 21st when Hakim attempted to flee. Despite being under surveillance, he had managed to contact allies in Dubai who arranged for a private yacht to approach the resort island during pre-dawn hours. Resort security spotted the unauthorized vessel, leading to Hakim's capture as he attempted to reach the beach through shallow waters. This escape attempt shattered any remaining diplomatic ambiguity. Maldivian authorities transferred Hakim to maximum security detention in Malé, and international arrest warrants were issued through Interpol to prevent any further escape attempts via diplomatic channels. The attempted escape was actually the best thing that could have happened for the prosecution, notes Inspector Shuryam. It eliminated any remaining sympathy for his position and solidified international support for trying him in Maldivian courts. On November 5, 2023, formal charges were filed: premeditated murder, concealment of evidence, and attempted escape from custody. The prosecution's 47-page filing detailed the complete timeline of events, supported by forensic evidence, digital communications, witness testimony, and financial records. The final investigative summary painted a clear picture of calculated rage and honor-based violence. A wealthy man who discovered his new wife's deception methodically exposed her lies over several days of psychological torture, and ultimately strangled her to death when the full extent of her pregnancy by another man became undeniable. As news of the charges spread across international media, 3 countries watched in horror and fascination as the dark truth emerged about what had really happened in that luxury water villa in paradise. The investigation had unraveled a deadly convergence of desperation, deception, and deadly rage, a modern tragedy played out against the backdrop of stunning natural beauty. The stage was now set for a trial that would captivate international attention and expose the dangerous fault lines between cultures, classes, and the desperate measures people will take when trapped between impossible choices. Act 6. The trial of Hakim Al-Mansouri began on January 15, 2024, in Malé, the capital city of the Maldives. After months of intense jurisdictional disputes, the UAE had fought aggressively for extradition, deploying legal teams, diplomatic pressure, and even economic threats involving tourism revenue. The Philippines had countered with international advocacy, mobilizing human rights organizations and leveraging media coverage of Rosalinda's tragic story. Ultimately, the Maldivian Supreme Court ruled that the crime had occurred on their sovereign territory and would be tried under their laws, a decision celebrated as a victory against the influence of wealth and power. The courthouse in Malé became an international focal point, with journalists from 3 continents crowding the limited public seating. Security measures were unprecedented: armed guards, metal detectors, and strict identification requirements for all attendees. The case had become more than a murder trial. It was a symbolic battle over wealth, gender, migrant vulnerability, and international justice. This court will determine whether money and influence can override the fundamental right to life, stated Chief Prosecutor Fathimath Nahila in her opening remarks. Whether a wealthy man can kill a vulnerable woman with impunity simply because she failed to meet his expectations. The defense strategy, led by renowned international attorney Hassan Mahmoud, centered on what they termed catastrophic deception. They portrayed Hakim as the victim of an elaborate con, a sophisticated scheme by Rosalinda to secure wealth and status through deliberate fraud. Mr. Al-Mansouri entered this marriage in good faith, Mahmoud argued. He was systematically deceived about Ms. Santos' background, education, and most critically, her pregnancy by another man. This was not a crime of premeditation, but a tragic outburst born of profound betrayal. This approach aimed to reduce the charges from premeditated murder to a crime of passion, voluntary manslaughter under Maldivian law, which carried a significantly lighter sentence. The defense team introduced evidence of Rosalinda's text messages to friends discussing her strategic approach to finding a wealthy husband, her falsified resume, and witness testimony from former colleagues about her calculated self-transformation. The prosecution countered with their meticulously constructed timeline of premeditation. They presented the private investigator's report, Hakim's financial transfers before the murder, and most damning, resort security footage showing his controlled demeanor in the days leading up to Rosalinda's death. This was not a sudden emotional outburst, Prosecutor Nahila emphasized. Mr. Al-Mansouri received confirmation of his wife's pregnancy on October 5th. He spent the next 36 hours systematically torturing her psychologically, planning his crime, arranging his escape, and finally executing his murder with calculated precision in the early hours of October 7th. Expert witnesses provided crucial context for understanding the crime. Dr. Amina Hussain, a specialist in domestic violence in transnational relationships, testified about the particular vulnerabilities of migrant women in marriages to wealthy men from conservative societies. When a woman like Rosalinda enters such a relationship, she exists in a state of complete dependence, Dr. Hussain explained. Financially dependent, legally dependent through visa status, socially isolated from support networks. This creates a perfect storm of vulnerability that abusers can exploit with minimal risk of consequences. Forensic psychologist Dr. Jonathan Chun analyzed Hakim's behavior patterns during the honeymoon, identifying classic signs of controlled, calculated rage rather than impulsive emotion. The psychological torture Mr. Al-Mansouri inflicted over those final days shows remarkable self-regulation, Dr. Chun testified. He systematically dismantled her defenses, exposed her deceptions publicly to maximize humiliation, and isolated her completely before the physical attack. These are not the actions of someone in the grip of uncontrolled emotion, but rather a calculated campaign of punishment leading to premeditated killing. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when Hakim Al-Mansouri took the stand in his own defense. Over 3 days of testimony, he presented himself as a respected businessman who had been manipulated and deceived. His demeanor was controlled, his responses carefully measured, his appearance impeccable in custom-tailored suits. "I provided everything for her," he testified. Security, status, wealth beyond anything she had known. In return, she lied about every aspect of her life and attempted to pass another man's child as my own, a deception that would have destroyed my family's honor and my business reputation when discovered. When pressed about the actual killing, his testimony revealed the underlying cultural values that had driven his actions. "You must understand what this deception meant in my world," he explained with disturbing calm. "She was carrying another man's child while wearing my name. The humiliation would have been absolute, extending to my other wives, my children, my extended family. Generations of reputation destroyed by her calculated deception. This testimony, intended to generate sympathy, instead cemented the prosecution's case for premeditation. When prosecutor Nahila asked if he regretted killing Rosalinda, his response sent shockwaves through the courtroom. "I regret trusting a woman who saw me only as a solution to her problems," he replied without emotion. "I regret not investigating her background more thoroughly before marriage. I regret the damage to my family's reputation. But I cannot say I regret protecting my honor." After 23 days of testimony and evidence presentation, the three-judge panel retired to consider their verdict. 4 days later, on February 11, 2024, they delivered their unanimous decision: guilty of premeditated murder in the first degree. Chief Judge Ibrahim Rashid delivered the verdict with a pointed statement about wealth and accountability. This court rejects any suggestion that emotional betrayal justifies taking a human life, or that cultural expectations regarding honor mitigate the crime of murder. Mr. Al-Mansouri made a deliberate decision to kill his wife, rather than pursue legal remedies for her deception, and he will face the full consequences of that decision. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later resulted in 25 years imprisonment without possibility of parole, the maximum penalty under Maldivian law for premeditated murder. Additionally, the court ordered compensation of $2 million to Rosalinda's family, to be paid from Hakim's personal assets. International reaction was swift and polarized. In the Philippines, the verdict was celebrated as justice for a vulnerable countrywoman against overwhelming odds. In the UAE, media coverage emphasized Rosalinda's deception while downplaying the murder itself, portraying Hakim as a victim of cultural misunderstanding and foreign justice systems. Human rights organizations praised the verdict as a landmark in holding wealthy perpetrators accountable regardless of their influence. Women's rights advocates emphasized the case's importance in highlighting the particular vulnerabilities of migrant women in transnational relationships. For the families directly involved, the aftermath brought different forms of grief and change. Rosalinda's body was repatriated to Cebu in late October 2023, where she was buried in a ceremony attended by hundreds of supporters, many of them former overseas workers who identified with her desperate search for security. Her mother, Rosalinda Santos, spoke briefly at the funeral. "My daughter made mistakes from desperation. She paid for those mistakes with her life and the life of her unborn son. No mother should have to bury a child who simply wanted a better life." In Dubai, the Al-Mansouri family retreated from public view. Hakim's first wife, Amina, took control of family business operations with their eldest son Saeed, working to distance the company from the scandal. His second wife, Farah, filed for divorce within weeks of his conviction, citing irreparable damage to her personal reputation. The case triggered significant policy changes across multiple countries. The Philippine government implemented enhanced protections for overseas workers, including mandatory pre-departure counseling about legal rights, emergency contact systems, and improved embassy support services in destination countries. The UAE quietly introduced reforms to its marriage regulations for foreign nationals, including more rigorous background verification processes and clearer legal protections for foreign spouses of citizens. The Maldives strengthened its resort security protocols and emergency response systems for incidents involving international guests. Perhaps the most significant legacy of the case was its spotlight on the vulnerability of migrant workers seeking relationships as pathways to security. Organizations working with overseas Filipino workers reported a surge in requests for support and information following media coverage of Rosalinda's story. What happened to Rosalinda reflects systemic issues that thousands of women face, explains Maria Concepcion Rivera of the Migrant Workers Protection Alliance. The desperate search for security, the power imbalance in relationships with wealthy men, the lack of protection under immigration laws. These are problems that extend far beyond one tragic case. Today, a small marble headstone in Cebu's public cemetery marks Rosalinda Santos' final resting place. The inscription reads, "Beloved daughter and sister who sought a better life, 1996 to 2023. A smaller marker beside it commemorates her unborn son, never named but mourned alongside his mother. Hakim Al-Mansouri remains in Maldivian custody, his appeals exhausted, his empire now managed by others. His case has become required study in international law courses examining cross-cultural criminal justice and the prosecution of crimes involving multiple jurisdictions. For those who knew Rosalinda in her various identities, the ambitious girl from Cebu, the hardworking domestic worker, the transformed sophisticate in Dubai's luxury malls, and finally the desperate bride hiding a pregnancy while seeking security, her story remains a painful reminder of the dangerous gambles people take when desperation meets opportunity. The tragedy that unfolded in that Maldives water villa reveals harsh truths about our world. How wealth can create the illusion of impunity, how desperation can drive deception, and how the collision between these forces can end in unspeakable violence. It reminds us that behind the curated social media images of luxury and romance often lie darker realities of power, control, and vulnerability. As we conclude our examination of this case, remember that thousands of women like Rosalinda navigate similarly dangerous waters every day, seeking security in a world that offers few guaranteed pathways from poverty to safety. The true measure of justice extends beyond one courtroom verdict to the systems and structures that create such desperate choices in the first place. If you've been affected by issues raised in this story, domestic violence, migrant worker rights, or exploitation in transnational relationships, resources and support organizations are linked in our description. Together, we can work toward a world where security doesn't require such dangerous gambles with one's life and dignity.